He uses super reel to reel. He doesn't.
Yeah, right.
Okay, everyone. Um, Today we're going to start a new series of biographies on a a Hasidic Rebbe, and I think we've done any on Hasidic Rebbe's before. Um, and I find this personality is one of my favorites to talk about. I've read many, many books about him, and I only met him once when I was about 20 years old. I met him. My father, I'll talk about it during the course of the series. It's recording. My father, Hashem, knew him as an American soldier, and I'll talk about that during the course of the course as well. And his name is Rabbi Yehuda Halberstam, or as they would say in America, Halberstam.
This felt, I know.
Halberstam is a well-known name in the Hasidic world. For a lot of Hasidic Rebbes are Halberstams. He was called the Rebbe of Klausenberg. I'll talk about in a minute where Klausenberg was from. There's something that I've come to a recognition of as I'm going through many of these uh, biographies, and it really is. I mean, I've known it before, but just in preparing these biographies, it's become very, very clear to me. Not all of them, but many of them that I'll be speaking about over the next few months are either survivors of the Holocaust or people who lived during and after the period of the Holocaust. Of course, we'll talk about others over the course of time also. We'll talk about the Chaim, God willing, we'll talk about many. And we may talk about people who lived hundreds of years ago. Maybe we'll do a series on Rashi, on Rambam. We'll see. But the ones that I'm doing now are from the more contemporary, and none of them that I'm speaking about now are alive anymore, but they're still like contemporary. And it's sort of mind-boggling to see how after 6 million were murdered, and the truth is there are really more than 6 million victims. As I said last week, the Pittsburgher Rav, who we spoke about for the last number of weeks, he considered himself amongst the 6 million, even though he lived, because so much was destroyed in his life. He just, as we said last week, that he felt that he had a choice of either going around depressed and smashing windows in anger or doing something with the energy that he had and the emotions that he had in building. And he used it to build Torah and to build the Jewish people. Um, it, with all the great people who were murdered, along with the common folk, the men, women, and children, simple, not so simple. You'd like to say there's really no such thing as a simple Jew, but nevertheless, simple, not so simple. God left us people who were so incredibly amazing and powerful, and who did so much that's beyond the scope of what one would think that one person could do, that even a group of people could do. And it was ordered to rebuild the Jewish world. Now, we've had great people throughout our history, certainly, and it's not for us to say who's greater than others. I mean, we talk about different eras, we talk about eras of greatness, and but you look at the heroics of what some of the people who survived the Holocaust did, and some of them single-handedly. Of course, God sent them people to work with them and to support them and to build with them, etc., etc. But it really is mind-boggling to think about what some of these people did. And the person we're going to speak about now, Rabbi Halberstam, the Klausenberger Rebbe, was one such person. As you would say with the Pittsburgher Rav, one would say that when you're going to hear today and in the coming weeks of what the Klausenberger Rebbe did in his lifetime, it's almost impossible to imagine at any point that one human being could accomplish so much that he could. We have many people. This was great, and this person built this, and this person built this. But when you'll hear the vastness of the empire that he built, and again, he's not the only one. It's really, you say, wow, God sent angels here on earth who work beyond the average human capacity. Or maybe, you know what, maybe not. Maybe it's within the human capacity when people push themselves, and most people just don't work like that. That's also a possibility, yeah. But certainly above, way, way above average, what we would consider a normal. And Rabbi Halberstam was one such person. His name was Yekusiel Yehuda and Halberstam. But he's not, if you say that to people today, many people wouldn't know who that is, but if you tell them the Klausenberger Rebbe, they'll know who it is. So that's who we're going to talk about, the Klausenberger Rebbe. Okay? Let me give you very, very brief biological sketch. He was born in 1904 in Galicia. Galicia was Lower Poland. I don't know if there was on the map a place called Galicia, but the Jews certainly had a place called Galicia. And I don't know, was it a country itself, or it was an area, a section of Lower Poland, I think, of Eastern Poland. He was a grandson of one of the great Hasidic Rebbes called the Rabbi Chaim Halberstam. Rabbi Chaim Halberstam himself was an incredible scholar, and usually, not always, usually the great scholars are associated with Lithuanian or other parts of Jewry, and I would say in the last few centuries, mostly Lithuanian Jewry. And the Hasidim also had scholars, but probably, again, I'm generalizing, not in the caliber of the Lithuanian scholars, and the Hasidim were known for other great areas of life. But we have to realize that although Reb Chaim Halberstam, the Sanz Rav, he was from Sanz, lived in the 1800s. At that point, certainly in the time of the Baal Shem Tov, before the Baal Shem Tov, there were no Hasidim. So anybody who became a Chassid, by definition, had to come from a home of non-Hasidim, right? But even as time passed, many of the great Hasidim came from homes, certainly until the mid-19th century, came from homes that were not Hasidim. And as a matter of fact, many of them came from homes of misnagdim. Misnagdim is the root of the word, means neged, which means opposite or opposition. The misnagdim were the opposers of Hasidim. And in the 18th century, the opposition to Hasidus, it was for theological reasons, were the students, and they were people led by the Gaon of Vilna. Now you understand that Hasidus itself was a revolution in the Jewish world. And anytime there's going to be a revolution, there's going to be opposition. The test of time will tell whether it was a worthy and revolution, and whether it had any content or depth or real meaning to it. Now, unfortunately, at least I would say, I think unfortunately for the Jewish people, the pain that we've suffered is that some of those movements lasted a couple of centuries. And when they last a couple of centuries, they do sometimes irreparable damage during the time that they're powerful, and then they fall by the wayside. It's impossible to say, but I think it's fair to say that Hasidus has withstood the test of time. And as they've already been around since the late 1600s, so we're talking about 350 years, and they're going strong. But not only are they going strong, but there have been revolutions, and this is a talk also for another time, but I think it's of interest to note that there have been revolutions within the revolution, right? Which means that Hasidus today doesn't look, at least according to what we were told and what we read, it does not look anything like the Hasidus of the early decades or of the early century of Hasidus. In the 19th century, there was a revolution within, and part of that revolution was to focus a lot more on Torah study, even by the Hasidim, than it was in the earlier years, where it was focused more on davening, where it was focused more on the joy of doing mitzvahs. And I'm not from a misnagid family, and there still are misnagdim opposers today, but it's nothing compared to what it was in the 1700s and the 1800s, where there were battles between the Hasidim and their opposition. And it's not a pretty part of Jewish history, as unfortunately we have many such battles. But both sides have withstood the test of time, and I think it's fair to say, I would even say that I've seen in my own lifetime develop and have a metamorphosis to some extent, that you would say that the Hasidic world and the non-Hasidic world in the Torah observant world sort of are blended. They've taken on customs from them, they've taken on customs from them. They're much more, if in the 1700s they were out here, today they're like here, and some of it actually like this, right? So yeah, you have opposition to Hasidim, but it's like they don't like that. They do this, they don't like to do this, and they don't like, but there's not there's no fights going on. I mean, you have fights within Hasidim and you have fights within the yeshiva world, unfortunately. But I mean, as far as Hasidim and its opposition, there aren't generally philosophical or theological fights and disputes within those groups because Hasidus has changed so much. As we've mentioned in the past, there are certain parts of the Hasidic world that hold steadfast and they're very easily recognizable. And I would say mostly it's the dress and oftentimes also the accent by which they speak and by which they read. So usually you can tell a Chassid. So the Divrei Chaim, Rabbi Chaim, he was known as the Divrei Chaim, which is the name of the book. Rabbi Chaim Sanz, who was the Klausenberger Rebbe's grandfather, came from a very, very strongly Hasidic opposition, his home. But somehow, I don't know how, he wound up being exposed to Hasidim, and he eventually himself became one of the greatest Hasidic Rebbes of his time. But he was perhaps, because I don't know who else there was on his level, the greatest scholar amongst all the Hasidic Rebbes because his training had been on the other side of the Jewish world. I don't mean geographically. I mean geographically. Right? So therefore, he was really a combination of both. And many of his descendants also, Torah study was a major, major priority with them, perhaps more than with other Hasidim of the time. The Klausenberger Rebbe was such an example. Now, I have to talk about something. I don't know how many. I mean, I have a few people online here. I have a few people here a few hundred people here in the room with me. But
you just multiply.
but I want to. Right, everyone is worth right. You also. I want to talk a little bit about the study of Torah because, in an area where I lack, but we have yeshivas and where we have kolim and we have Baruch Hashem, we have great scholars, and we have people studying Torah full time. I want to just spend a few minutes talking about why Torah study is such a priority amongst Jews, that it's considered the main mitzvah that a Jewish male is required. It doesn't exempt him of other mitzvahs, but he's required to study Torah. What is Torah? And is it just like, okay, it's knowledge. I know the Jewish history. I know the laws. I've studied the Talmud, right?
It's a moral code. It's a moral code.
According to other teachings, when a person studies Torah in depth, that means not sitting back on a couch and lying and reading a book, even, or somebody has a great mind that sometimes can study something just by reading it and absorbing it. When somebody puts his sweat and tears and time and his entire intellectual power into study of Torah, it's not information. It's much more than information. So let me just talk a little bit, because this week was the 13th, 14th yahrzeit of Rabbi Nosson Tzvi Finkel, who was the head of the Mir Yeshiva in Yerushalayim. And he was an American boy, born, yes.
I just have a comment about the study of Torah. Looking at the bookshelves and how you fill them up. I see one bookshelf is full of Gemara, Talmud, and everything. The other is something I can absorb myself. And I have to think about how we got these books from these books.
It's an interesting topic and an interesting discussion, okay, but not for now. Right?
Okay.
Maybe another 4-week session every day for 4 weeks.
But I think about the study.
It's definitely a good question, and both of them are considered study of Torah, but they're very, very different, okay, in terms of what we're going to speak about. Okay, Rabbi Nosson Tzvi Finkel, as some of you know, he passed away in his early 70s, and he was, for the last many years of his life, crippled with Parkinson's disease. When I say crippled, you couldn't understand a lot of what he said. He had no energy. He couldn't walk anymore. For him to say a few words, it was an effort for him. As Rabbi Aaron Malkiel Cutler said at one of the eulogies, Aaron Malkiel Cutler is the dean of the Lakewood Yeshiva, and I know I'm going off on tangents, but it's all important as an introduction, a general introduction to everything that we do, but certainly to the Klausenberger Rebbe. The Rabbi Malkiel Cutler, at one of the eulogies for Rabbi Finkel, said that if we knew somebody who was as ill as Rabbi Nosson Tzvi Finkel. Literally, I mean, he could hardly talk. He shook like a leaf. He couldn't walk without holding on or being held. And if we knew such a person, and we said that he came to study every day, and every day for the last 10 years of his life, he studied an hour of Talmud in the Beis HaMedrash uninterrupted, we would say, what a holy man. With that level of energy and with that level of illness, he still spent an hour a day coming and davening every day, and then an hour a day, we would say. And Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel, even at this stage, he spent 10, 12 hours a day studying. He traveled the world, raising money for the yeshiva. He didn't stop. He didn't stop giving lectures. He had anybody in the yeshiva who wanted to study with him, he would say yes. He had tens, dozens of study partners of chavrusas every week that he would study with. And this is in his illness. He was just an incredible human being. So he has a brother-in-law. He married, Rabbi Nosson Tzvi married the daughter of a previous Mira Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbeinu Finkel. Rabbeinu Finkel had 5 daughters. And he must have felt something. Each one of them married an American. They themselves were not American. They were all either born in Eastern Europe, or they were born already in Eretz Yisrael. I'm not sure where they were born, but all of them married Americans. And Baruch Hashem, 4 of them are still alive. Rabbi Finkel passed away, as I say, 11, 12 years ago. So the youngest one is Rabbi Aaron Lopiansky, who's the Rosh Yeshiva in the Yeshiva of Greater Washington. He's American-born, spent many years studying in Eretz Yisrael. Actually, as he did with many other scholars, Rabbi Noach Weinberg had the wisdom to pluck him and bring him to Eshat Torah as a Rebbe and a teacher for many, many years, where he had a major impact. Then he came back to America, and now he's the Rosh Yeshiva of Greater Washington. Very, very widely respected across the spectrum of Orthodox Jewry for his wisdom and his insight. I had a major issue this week, something that was bothering me terribly. I was going to lose sleep over it until I actually spoke with him and called him, and he calmed me down about something. So, I mean, he gave me an insight that I didn't think about. So he was very helpful. So I heard him last night. I was going through something. It's amazing that it was before this class, because I was looking for something totally different. And I came across a eulogy that he gave on his brother-in-law, Rav Nosson Tzvi, during the Shloshim, during the period of, and he gave it in Eshat Torah in Jerusalem. And he said as follows. He said, throughout history, there have been many brilliant non-Jews. We've had geniuses. We've had philosophers. They may have been mistaken in some areas, but they were great. Like, and he said, for instance, Aristotle. Maimonides felt that Aristotle was so great that his wisdom was one level lower than prophecy. That's quite a compliment to give to somebody. And of course, Maimonides was criticized for that. Maimonides was criticized because he knew so much Aristotelian philosophy, and sometimes, wrote things that the rest of the world didn't agree with. But when you read something, and this will touch a drop on what you said, not quite, but you'll hear what I mean. When you read something or you study something and you get it and it resonates with you, and you even enjoy the study of it, and you learn and you get more out of it. So you're dealing still within the realm of the physical world, but you may at times touch spiritual concepts. But they're all things that remain sort of within this physical world and can elevate us intellectually, and maybe even help us improve our character, because I'm learning things that make sense to me. I'm learning things that I'm working on. And by virtue of learning them, I grow in different ways, emotionally, spiritually. But then there's something else. Then there is a point where you come to study Torah in such depth, with such passion, with such commitment, that where you're reaching, what you're touching is more, which is why people sometimes can study Torah. I'll get to it in a second. I'm switching the sentence. Can study Torah. Why do I have to learn this topic? Why do I have to know this topic? Because it's God's mind. God gave us his Torah, and it's expands. It's infinite. If God is infinite, so as it were, his mind is infinite. As it were. It's hard to say his mind. What does that mean? God and his mind are one. But you get to a place in learning Torah, through Torah, that you are connecting with the divine. It's not that you have information. It's that you've given over your soul. You've given over yourself. You have such a love and a passion for it that you become intimate with that thing. So, for instance, as an example, Rabbi Lopiansky said, let's say you have a couple that's married 50, 60 years, and let's say they have a very good marriage, right? I used to tell a lot of jokes about those kinds of things, but now, Baruch Hashem, I'm married 42 years. Hopefully, on the way to many more, I stopped with the jokes already. I was like, Amen. But, you'll say to somebody, like, what's the secret? What do you like about your wife that you've been able to stay married so long? So if you were to ask that of somebody who's dating or courting somebody, right? Or they've been married for a short time. So Rabbi Lopiansky said, you can give an answer. I like this, I like that. This is what I liked about it. This is why I married her. But after somebody's married half a century, you might like this and but that's not what makes the marriage work. She's me. I'm her. Like, I like myself. I like her. Like, we're one. We've been working on this for 50 years. There's nothing I can say. Oh, that's what I like about it. There's a certain intimacy of emotion, a certain intimacy of becoming one, that you become one with them. It's like sometimes couples, as they move along in marriage, it's almost like twins, that sometimes they just know what the other one is thinking. They know what the other one is feeling. I know husbands wish they knew what their wives were thinking.
It's our secret.
But it's not like, oh, I know this about her and I know this. It's not like an intellectual exercise that one, before they're married, they can mix that intellectual exercise with emotion, and you come up with a potion that you hope is going to work, or you're convinced is going to work until the original sparks wear off. When one is together with somebody else for a long time, that it's not that. It's something that's way beyond. That's what we call yediyah, knowledge. Knowledge is not just intellectual knowledge. It's an intimate emotional bonding. When somebody studies Torah on a certain level, when somebody studies the depth of Torah and goes into it and sweats over it and pours into it and spends his days and nights over it, you become, as it were, traipsing God's mind. You become intimately familiar with God, I mean, to the extent that a human being can, but it's beyond the average human interaction. It's beyond what we would say the physical world is. And that study of Torah, which has given the Jews its holiness throughout life, and I know many people who are not exposed to Torah say, all right, it's a nice thing. We have to know. You got to know the law. I've got to learn the Chumash. This is Jewish history. It's nice to learn. But what is all this about study of Torah that we talk about? You have yeshivas and kollel, and we should support them. That's the essence. That's the heart of the Jewish people. That's what keeps us aligned with Hashem. It's more than just, it's like somebody can have such a relationship with God in life that I don't have to give you philosophical proofs to his existence, or I don't have to give you philosophical proofs to my relationship with him, or that I have a connection to him. I live it. I experience it. That's what Hashem gave when he gave the Torah to the Jewish people. It's unique to the Jewish people. You can have a genius, an Aristotle who may not read Hebrew, who may not understand it. You could take the Art Scroll and go through every page of the Art Scroll Talmud, and maybe if he has a super memory, remember every word by heart. Let's just say there was somebody in the, right? And he would intellectually be able to quote everything from you, and he still wouldn't have that connection. He would have an intellectual connection with it, and sometimes it would be exciting for him, sometimes not. I'm assuming if he's going to know every word of the Art Scroll by heart, he has some intellectual connection, else he wouldn't have wasted his time on it, right? But it's not part of his soul. It's not part of it doesn't make him godly. That was a gift that was given by Hashem to the Jewish people. When it says in the Torah, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God. The Zohar writes that the word Anochi, Aleph, Nun, Kaf, Yud is the Rosh Tevos. It's an acronym for Ano Nafshi Ksavas Yahavas. I'm giving over myself in writing, God says. I'm giving over, again, we can't know God, but I'm giving myself over. Anything that you have can have a relationship with me. I'm giving over to you in this Torah. That's something that can only be done by a Jew. And it's because of the gift of the neshama and the Torah that we were given that wasn't given to others. So intellectually, somebody might be able to get it, although it's hard to imagine that you would take somebody who is a great secular scholar to study Talmud, that they would even come close to a true Torah scholar in terms of the study, even if they were studying the same thing. Rabbi Lopiansky said about Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel. And again, if we don't talk about the Klausenberger Rebbe, so we'll move on, because the Torah study was such an important part of the Klausenberger Rebbe's life. So even as a Hasidic Rebbe, which is how I came into this introduction, that you can have a teacher who teaches you something intellectually, and you can even learn from it. But if you don't have a teacher who gives over the passion of what he's learning, who can give over the love of Yiddishkeit for what he's doing, so then you're going to wind up with intellectual information. And either you like it or you won't, or you'll follow it or you won't. But you're not going to become alive from it. You're not going to get your chiyus. You're not going to get your very essence and your cause of growth and living and excitement for life from it. A father who teaches his son Torah, or a Rebbe who teaches his son Torah and teaches them the facts. Yeah, okay, they could make a scholar per se, as you can have a scholar in science, or you can have a scholar in another area. But if you have a mother who, as I told you 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, when there was a snowstorm in it wasn't in Punovish, in Kul, where the Punovish Kuhl, where the Punovish Rav grew up, and they had one pair of boots, and you remember, and there was a question of who's going to have the privilege of going to study Torah, which child is going to have it, and everyone wanted to, and the mother made 3 trips carrying her children through the snow to and from school, and then when school was over, she would, each one, the mother walked to school, carried each one back. When you see that love of Torah, how much a mother cares, how precious, and we're not talking about the scholar in the family, we're talking about the person who has it here, and they're able to convey that passion. That is what gives a child a love of Torah, that then when they go and study, they can build on that, and they can use that information, what they're learning, and expand the love based on what they're learning. It's just like an incredible thing. And there are people who love Torah learning like that. I'm not including myself in that, but I look at those people. Those are also, the people who survived the Holocaust and remained loyal and faithful to God and to the Jewish people, my heroes. But the people I look up to and say, that should be my soul. And I look at Chaim, those are the people who talk to me, who I admire. Those are the people who grab my neshama. Yeah. Rav Nosson Tzvi Finkel, he said a shir like any other Rosh Yeshiva. Some liked it better, some liked it worse. It was in depth. He was a great scholar. He learned many hours a day. As I said, even when he was so ill, other people learned many hours a day. But when you heard, Rabbi Lopiansky said, when you heard Rav Nosson Tzvi speak about Torah, there's a video of him when he attended maybe 14, 15 years ago, a Siyum HaShas, the completion of the entire Talmud with the Daf Yomi, right, with tens or hundreds of thousands of people around the world. And he was asked to finish, and the words are Hadron Alach Masechtas Nida. Hadron Alach Talmud Bavli. I'll come back to you, Talmud Bavli. Meaning I finished you, but I'm going to come back to you. You're my friend. He says on the video, and usually you can't pick up these things on video, but it's so powerful. He says, these are the most beautiful words in the world. Is there anything more beautiful then saying the words, Hadron Allah Talmud Bavli, I'm going to come back to you. Those of you who've seen the video know what I'm talking about. And the love of Torah just oozes out from him. That's the love of the mother. Shema B'ni, it's in the Siddur every day after Moda'ani, in most Siddurs it's in there. Shema B'ni, King Solomon says, Shema B'ni Musar Avicha. Hear, my son, the rebuke of your father, listen to it. But al titosh Torah simecha, but don't abandon the Torah of your mother. That's what the verse says. The Torah of your mother are not words. The Torah of the mother is something that goes beyond words. It's something that lives in the neshama of the mother. And it can live in the neshama of a Rebbe or a father, of a teacher, but they have to have that love of the mother. That's why the Gemara says women have a merit that they bring their children to the Talmud Torah. It doesn't just mean that they take them by the hand and they walk them to school. That's also a big deal. But they take them with love. They teach them. Like Reb Meir Shapiro's mother, the one who founded Daf Yomi, well-known story when they couldn't afford to pay a teacher for him. And one day he came home and the stove that they had in the house that kept them warm during the winter, they didn't have it. And his mother said, we took it apart and sold it to somebody who needed a stove so we could have the money to teach you that you would be able to study Torah over the winter. When a mother shows that kind of love for Torah, it's not hard to imagine why Reb Meir Shapiro would grow up with such a Ahavas HaTorah. So the Klausenberger Rebbe was asked once, he had such a love of Torah, and we'll talk about his life, we'll talk about his biography, we'll talk about his times in Auschwitz and in the Warsaw Ghetto and other, we'll talk about what he went through over there. But he would say, when people talked to him about his love for Torah, he would say that his great-grandfather, the Sanz Rav, he had a little room in the front of his shul. And when you think of a shul of those people, you don't think of this. I mean, it's probably a quarter of the size, if that much, and it was a little shtibel, whatever, however many people they had davening there. In the Ger shul from the Ger Hasidim in Poland, that was there in 2014, it must have been a miracle, like in the Beis Hamikdash. Let's say 10,000 Hasidim came for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur to be with the Rebbe. The shul looks like it could hold maybe 300 or 400, and the courtyard outside held thousands, and 10,000 people would come. I don't know how they came there. Yeah. So, but it sounds like the Rebbe's oftentimes at the front of the shul. It's like I have the electric closet. They had a little room over there where they would go and study and meet people. Right? So, that was their electric closet. So they say that before shofar blowing, the Sanz Rav used to spend a few minutes in solitude in that room. So people were sure that he was doing Kabbalistic meditations and he was spending time and he was crying. It came out that, again, remember that his background from a totally Torah study background from the Litvasha, from the Lithuanian ilk. And one of the greatest books that we have from the last hundreds of years for in-depth learning that empowers the brain and the mind and the soul of one is a sefer called the Ketzos HaChoshen. It's a book. It doesn't matter for this purpose of this conversation. And he was studying that. And that was his preparation for shofar blowing. And they asked him once, why the shofar blowing? Why before shofar blowing? So the Klausenberger Rebbe, speaking about his great-grandfather, said, I'll tell you, there was a man, I'll give you a parable. There was a man who went out to work every day. And he earned a few dollars here, a few dollars there. And every night he would come home. And the members of his family would come to him and they would say to him, after the day's work, depending on what the father had, these are my needs, I need a few dollars for this, and then a few dollars. And then he would distribute money to his family based on what they need and what he had and what they asked for. One day he comes home and the children come, the wife comes, the members of the household come, and he's generous. He gives them this, he doesn't ask what they need, he gives them money, he gives them extra money, more than what they need. And they say, Abba, Daddy, why are you distributing so much money? He said, I had such a nice day. Besides that, I made money. I'm so happy today. And when I'm happy, I give without even being asked. The Zohar writes, says the Klausenberger Rebbe, that Hashem rejoices. He's happy when the Jewish people study Torah in depth and they elevate themselves with their Torah study. He says, how much joy I have, said the Klausenberger Rebbe, when I study the Ketzos HaChoshen. And if I'm learning it in depth and I'm enjoying it, then Hashem is happy. So now by Tkiyah Shofar, I'm coming and asking him for something like the Father was happy. You don't even have to ask. I'm happy to give it to you. It's a totally different mindset than we would have. If this is, as it were, again, as it were, makes God happy, that's what connects God with the Jews. Hashem is happy, so he went to study. It's such a not Hasidic story of a Hasidic Rebbe. Right? It really is not. But that's what the Klausenberger Rebbe used to say about his grandfather. So I want to read to you something. I left my, Tom, can I ask you for a favor, please? You know where my desk is? No, I was talking to that Tom. Sorry. Tom. Actually, his Hebrew name is Tom. On my desk, I think next to my computer, you'll see my cell phone. Can you please bring it to me? Thank you. I took a picture of something, of a letter that the Klausenberger Rebbe wrote, because after he came to America, he was this great Hasidic Rebbe. He was starting to rebuild his Hasidus, which was decimated. I mean, the Hasidic world and the Lithuanian Yeshivish world, which were the two main worlds of Judaism, of Torah Judaism, were decimated. There was almost nothing left of the Hasidus. Remember I said last week that the Panovich Rav, he built yeshivas, or he had a dream of building all of Eretz Yisrael with names of the different yeshivas in Lithuania that he had, right? Well, all these today, you have little Rebbes and you have little shuls. Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you. You have all these little Rebbes and all these little shuls. These were Hasidisim that were dead since 1942. And now 80 years later, some of them are still tiny, but some of them are huge. Satmar and Bobov and Belz and Ger and Chabad, they've been rebuilt unbelievably. And yet, in his early years as a Rebbe, he started to teach young children Torah. The Klausenberger Rebbe, and people said, here you are, you're trying to build after the war, and you're a Hasidic Rebbe. Whoever heard of a great Hasidic Rebbe going and teaching small teaching, not giving one class, but this is what he does. So he wrote a letter, and let me just see one thing, which page I want to go to, just 1 second. Despite the Rebbe's involvement with it, don't do that to me. Despite the Rebbe's involvement with his numerous projects in Eretz Yisrael, he saw his principal vocation as teaching Torah to young disciples. In 1962, 2 years after his first move to Eretz Yisrael, we'll see, he moved to Eretz Yisrael in 1960. He went back and forth. He still had a place in Union City, New Jersey, where there still is a nice cluster of Klausenberger Hasidim over there. He wrote to a friend as follows: "You have surely heard, this is in Eretz Yisrael, that I have become a teacher. I've taken some 20 children, and several yeshiva bachrim to my study house, to my Beis Medrash, and they are under my personal supervision almost the whole day. I must work very hard, and I'm preoccupied to an extent that you can't imagine. But this is the only thing out of all my work that my soul finds pleasure in." Baruch Hashem, you'll see, he did a lot. My soul finds pleasure in. Would that their numbers double and triple, so that the sing-song of pure children's Torah study reverberates in my Beis Medrash, in my Torah study hall. Naturally, some of our friends feel that this detracts from the dignity of being a Rebbe, arguing that the Chas v'Shalom, heaven forbid, a Rebbe should teach Torah. I can't read upside down. I'm not Yemenite. The Rebbe should teach Torah and supervise Torah study, and that engaging in such an activity is utterly incompatible with holding the office of Rebbe. They're worried that the title Rebbe might be tarnished. For what will people say? Is this a Rebbe? Why, he's only busy with Torah study all day? And such other arguments. In my opinion, we could do without 1,000 such Rebbes. Boy, say that to the Hasidic Rebbes. They don't like that, right? But he wrote this. In my opinion, we could do without 1,000 such Rebbes. It's worthwhile training a single worthy disciple who, in the merit of our holy ancestors and the Holy Land, he had an unbelievable love for Eretz Yisrael, will sanctify Hashem's name by following in the footsteps of our holy ancestors. Amen. May this be Hashem's will. That was what he wrote. The Rebbe used to say, it's worth living 120 years solely in order to train a single worthy disciple, and guide him on the Torah's path. One doesn't need to be a chassid or to have witnessed the adulation Hasidim show their Rebbe to be impressed and inspired by the powerful love of Torah that can prompt the declaration, we could do without 1,000 such Rebbes. It's worthwhile it's worthwhile training a single worthy disciple. He was teaching children. He said, this is the only way to build the Jewish people. So my point is, yes, we have wonderful organizations out there, and they're great. They're super. They're superb. And we need the chesed organizations, and we need the schools, we need X, Y, we need this. It's almost all good. Be careful what you give your money to. Don't waste it. But there are a lot of good places out there to give your money, right? But the core and base of the Jewish people is the study of Torah. And those who don't have that, ultimately they're going to fizzle away, because that is who the Jewish people are. It's not another nice thing. God gave us the Torah at Sinai. That's when he made us a people, right? And I'm not there, but I've seen people who live like that. And that's what Rabbi Lopiansky said about his brother-in-law, Reb Nosson Tzvi Finkel. When you saw him, and he would suffer with his Parkinson's, yet he made an effort to teach. Sometimes I've seen films of it. My sons were in the yeshiva in Mir when this would happen. He would sit at the front of the Beis Medrash. He shook like a leaf. I met him a few times. I remember on a couple of trips that I took guys to Israel, we went to see him. And one time he sat with us and he shook and he shook. But there was twice when we went. I think we went to see him 3 different trips, where he was so weak, where when we got into the house, he said, the Rosh Hashiva has said that he's sorry, he doesn't have the energy. He'll be lying down in bed in his study room where he studied, in his dining room, which was loaded with books. He doesn't have the energy to meet with you, but he said he would meet with you, and he's keeping his word. So you can come in, say a few words to him, but he won't have the time to talk with you. And everybody would come in, and he'd shake everybody's hand and give us a blessing. But at the end of the day, where he said, I can't go to sleep, I want to study, or he would have almost no energy to talk, and he would tell his brother-in-law, Rabbi Benyamin Carlebach, tomorrow's shir in the yeshiva is going to be about such and such and such. Write down the topics that I'm going to discuss and put it on a sign. That's what they do. When the Rosh Hashiva gave a sign, they would write so the boys knew in advance what he's going to talk about, so they would know what to study. He didn't have an energy, but this is what gave him life. And you saw it with people like Reb Nosson Tzvi. But Klausenberger Rebbe, totally different personality. But I only wanted to introduce that because we're going to speak about a lot of great things about the Klausenberger Rebbe. But you need to know that he felt that the core of everything that he did was his own study of Torah and the building up of Torah amongst the Jewish people. And the great Jews, that was always there. Well, right? So you can do a lot of other things, but you have to know ultimately, why am I doing this for the Jewish people? What do the Jewish people stand for? And the Klausenberger Rebbe lived with all his building and everything, as did Reb Nosson Tzvi, but very, very different. It was for Torah and for the Jewish people. So God willing, next time we'll start talking more details about his life and what he went through in the Holocaust and what he built afterwards. And stories, I've told many stories from the pulpit here about him. It's an amazing life, and it's a privilege to have you here to listen to be able to me to share. And I'm not a Klausenberger chassid. I'm a great admirer of being able to share some of his life, and hopefully he learns of some of his lessons of how to treat human beings and how he related to God after the Holocaust. And we'll talk about that in future weeks. Thank you.
So we are on Parshat Vayera, and we're on 78, 79. We are in the middle of these 2 parshas about Abraham and Sarah. We started last week with Lech Lecha, and although we didn't get to it, but I was at laning on Shabbos, and I know that they laned the whole parsha, so they got to Bris Milah at the end, and that's how Parsha Lech Lecha ends, is with the Bris Milah, with Abraham giving himself Bris Milah. Medrash says Hashem held his hand, did however it worked. He was 99 years old. And he gave himself Bris Milah, and also his son Yishmael, who was 13 at the time, and all the people that were with him, all the men.
Incredible.
So now where we meet Abraham in the beginning of Parshat Vayera is literally right in the middle. This is now the 3rd day after he gave himself Bris Milah. And that's where it says in Parshat Vayera, so it says, Vayera Elov Hashem Ba'alnei Mamre. Hashem appeared to him in the plains of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. And Rashi explains to us that this is The third day after the bris, the third day is the most difficult day. They say the third day after surgery or the third day after an illness or something like that. The third day is the most severe day. In fact, when a person gets sick, so they say that a person should not give his name to the shul in order to say a mishaberach until after he's been sick for 3 days. He might get better right away. So you don't want to make oneself into a chole, into a sick person prematurely, right? If it goes into the third day, okay, then refuah shalema, but not before then. So Rashi explains to us that what is the reason that Hashem is here visiting Abraham? And we learned so many things in these parshas, so many things. The Sefer Bereshit is called Sefer HaYashar. It's the book of the straight. And what we're learning about is Yesharim. So we're learning about, we only have 3 mitzvahs in Sefer Bereshit. So what we're learning is to gain a level where we're able then to receive the Torah in Parsha Shmos. So we're basically training ourselves and learning from watching the lives of the Avos and the Imos, learning how to be a proper vehicle to be able to accept and to be able to take in Torah and to attach to it. And it's as Rabbi Meyer was saying, it's not an intellectual exercise. It's an exercise of connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and through that connection, really becoming a changed person. We talked about last week about these tests. We have these 10 tests going on through here, and the tests are bringing Avraham to a whole new level. And you can't have a test where you know what the end result is before you take the test. You can only have a true test that's going to change you if you don't realize what the end is going to be. So it's going into an unknown area, because if you already know what it is, then you don't need to grow to that level because you're already at that level. So you need to go beyond what the levels are. And so that's what Abraham is doing. So here we have an interesting situation where we have Hashem is visiting Abraham, and we're learning from that Bikur Cholim, that Hashem is visiting the sick. And that's one of the mitzvahs that we have. It's one of actually the big 10. If you say Birchas HaTorah in the morning, we say after Birchas HaTorah, we say a brisa, and we say these are things where that people get rewarded, get the peros in this world, and they don't diminish their care, and they don't diminish the principle in the world to come. And one of those things is Bikur Cholim. One of those mitzvahs is is visiting the sick. Then it says at the end, right, Talmud Torah keneged kulam, and Talmud Torah is greater than them all. Mm-hmm. So, but Bikur Cholim is one of these big 10 mitzvahs, right? That we list in that price in the morning. So Bikur Cholim is what Hashem is doing here with Avraham Avinu, and Abraham lifts his eyes and he sees, which the Torah describes them to us at this point as men. Right? He lifts his eyes. V'yiso einav. He lifts his eyes. V'yar, and he sees. V'hine shalosha anoshim. Anoshim are men. To Abraham, they look like men. You see later with Lot, they're angels, because at Abraham's level. Abraham's at that high level. They were like men.
Yeah. Standing over him means uphill from him, because otherwise, like, couldn't run towards them if they were right over them, looking over them.
Standing before him is the translation I have. Standing before him.
Standing before him.
Does it say in the English over here? Does it say standing over him? Yeah.
Yes.
But it's a lifnei. So lifnei.
He was sitting and they were standing.
The Hebrews in the
ran uphill.
He does.
Which is,
well, I don't know if he ran uphill, but whatever he ran, he had just had bris milah. So guess what? If he ran level or if he ran uphill, I think that it's a minor difference. So it's just, it was a difficult thing for him to do.
Yeah.
But the most difficult thing to do, we just learned from Rabbi Meyer, when one learns Torah, when one's studying Torah, one's connecting with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And now there are some guests that are coming, and he breaks himself away from the connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How hard is that spiritually? But yet he realizes that doing the mitzvahs of Haknosas Orchim, of, taking care of guests,
That is
is
interesting.
right.
First of all, he couldn't have been studying Torah because there was no Torah.
There was Torah. I'm sure there was Torah. There was Torah in the Shiva of Shem Ve'ever. There was Torah at the time of Noah. There was Torah at the time of Adam HaRishon. It was all Torah. Hashem was communicating with people all through the generations. That's Torah. That's Torah. Torah is the connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where he's communicating about how he would like his world to be run.
So Torah is not necessarily this work here.
This is the written Torah.
Yeah.
But then we have companion with that is the oral Torah.
Yeah, but you say he knew about Yetzias Mitzrayim and all the
He intuited about, because one of the things that happens here is that we see that they're going to be eating matzahs. And so it was Pesach. So we're going to see that it was Pesach time. And so because in the world is this energy. Now, true, there hadn't been the slavery of Mitzrayim, and there hadn't been Yetzias Mitzrayim yet, but there's that energy in the world that the world was created. Remember, Hashem is above time. So all the things are happening kevayochel, from Hashem's viewpoint, simultaneously in every single tekuf. It's hard to even say that, but Hashem has everything in front of him, right? It's all there. So it's the energy is coming.
Not only a Navi, but one of the greatest Naviim ever.
Well, he was a great Navi, but he wasn't as great as Moshe Rabbeinu. I mean, the Torah testifies to that he wasn't as great as Moshe Rabbeinu, because there never was a Navi as great as Moshe, either before or after. So as great as Abraham Avinu was as a Navi, he wasn't as great as Moshe, but he was a great Navi, and he did intuit all of the Taryag mitzvahs. When we say a psalm on Shabbos morning, right after, when we start the special psalms for Shabbos in Pesukah Zimra, Lamnat Seach, so that psalm is basically how Abraham saw the operations of the world. It goes through that, and then about a third of the way through the psalm, it says Torah Hashem Tamima, because that's when we got the Torah. So Abraham had it before that, before the Torah came into the world. We have the great privilege and luxury to have this Torah, right, written down for us, and then we have the oral Torah, which is now written down for us also. So we have the ability, because we're so low in our generation, we have the ability to be able to access it. Otherwise, there'd be no access for us. And I say to myself, that I would have no access but for Art Scroll. Because I started learning before Art Scroll came about, and we struggled. When Art Scroll came in, it just made a whole connection to be able to really understand.
What did Art Scroll do? Just put it to language that you could access?
It translated it and elucidated it from the Aramaic to the English. Because otherwise, for most of us in America in that time, in that generation, like in the 90s, we were locked out. If we had a Rebbe, fortunately I had Rabbi Meyer, I had Rabbi Tursky, and so they translated and they gave us, but we didn't have, I got the Art Scroll Sitter, I think in the first printing, it must have been about 1990 or 91. It was brand new, and I was so grateful for it. Because otherwise it was, and even growing up when we had English translations, when I was at BMH, when BMH was conservative, we had the Hertz Chumash. Do you know what that is?
Yes.
Yes.
And so
It was
the English was not understandable.
it was the King's English, which
It was difficult. And then when I first started learning Gemara, I had a Sansino. Do you know what the Sansino Gemara was?
Yeah.
So Sansino initially came out in French. And evidently, for those who speak French, like one of my Havrusas speaks French, and he says pretty good French. But in English, when they translated the French to the English, it was virtually unintelligible on the English side, let alone on the Aramaic side.
I still have Sansino, Nevi'im from
It's
Sansino.
from Sansino, yeah. I mean, they certainly served a purpose. I mean, Sansino it was a great work at the time because it unlocked a lot of different things. And the Chumash Rashi that I used at the time was this. I don't know if you remember them. Blue volumes, and they were like interlineated, a translation. But it was also, it was an exact translation as opposed to an elucidated translation that ArtScroll did. What ArtScroll did was basically unlock it by putting it into modern English. I call it modern English. And that made it accessible. So anyway, so again, we got on a tangent, but
Okay.
good one. All right, so we're going, so he sees before him these three men, which we know Rashi tells us that there are three angels, and there's some really important fundamental things going on in this parsha. One of the things is that we learned that angels can only do one thing at a time. They only get one mission, then they do that mission, then they get another mission, but they can only do one thing at a time, right? Mostly they're like men, except men don't think they can only do one thing at a time.
That means we're close to angels.
Women can do multiple things at a time. Men can't, but they think they can.
Men know they can do one thing at a time. They don't think it, they know it.
There's some people they can't even, some like me, I can't even do one thing at a time. So what happens is that we're three angels come to visit. One is the Gemara in Bava Metzia tells us, Rashi doesn't even tell this, but the Gemara in Bava Metzia says that one was Michoel. Michoel came to tell about the birth of Yitzhak. He's the kind of the archangel, although we don't really have one because we go directly to Hashem, but he's kind of the angel that looks after the Jewish people. That's Michoel. Raphael came because he came to heal Abraham from the bris. And Gabriel came because Gabriel came to tell Abraham about what was going to happen in Sodom and Gomorrah. So those were their three missions, and that's why they needed three, Rashi says, because an angel can only do one thing at a time. Now, we go beyond that in a little bit for a Hasidic type of understanding of this. Well, I'll skip that. I'll go on. We can get that when we get to Parshat Beshalach. So these three men, these three slash angel, they come, and there's three of them. They can only do one thing at a time. So they come in and they see Abraham, and Abraham wants to have them for a meal. Abraham's kind of method of operation was to give people lavish meals, and then the people would thank him. Oh, we want to thank you so much for this meal. And he would say, don't thank me. Thank Hashem. Hashem is the one that provided everything. And in that way, he was able to bring people's awareness to Hashem, that Hashem is not only in the heavens, but Hashem is also in the earth. And so anyway, so he's preparing this elaborate meal for these angels. And and he's going to get different things. He sends for the water. So that's why Rashi explains to us that in the Midbar, we get the water, we have to get it from a rock. We have to get it from an agent because Abraham didn't do that himself. But Abraham provided the food for himself, so therefore we get the man directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? And they were under a tree, so that's the representative of the Anan HaKavod that we had when we were in the Midbar. The clouds of glory taking care of us. And so he's getting everything ready. He asked Sarah to get ready 3 saws of meal, fine flour, and knead and make cakes. It's Pesach. So therefore, they're going to be matzahs. However, she never brings them back because at that moment, she was rejuvenated and she began her period. And so she was then tameh, and so she couldn't continue to prepare it. So we never see those cakes coming back. And then Abraham runs to the cattle. And so he's running to the cattle. The Midrash says that the calf ran away. He was getting actually 3 calves because he gave them each one a calf. So it ran into a cave, a particular cave, and Abraham ran after it to go get it. And he saw this amazing light, says the Gemara in Baba Basra, this amazing light coming from the bottom of the cave. And he goes to investigate, and he gets the calf, and he comes back. But in next week's Parsha, we'll see what he saw there. He saw the light of the heel of Adam Rishon. So he knew that in this Moras HaMakpelah, in this cave of Machpelah, was Adam and Chava. So that's what he wanted as the burial place for himself and Sarah, which is in next week's Parsha, 38 years later, basically. He's going to be paying whatever it takes to get that particular burial spot, to be buried there. And then that's Hebron. That's where Morris HaMachpelah is, and that's where Adam and Chava are buried, and Adam and Sarah, and Yitzchak and Rivka, and Yaakov and Leah, not Rachel. Rachel's in Ephrat, and Esav's head. That's what's buried in Morris HaMachpelah. Okay, and so anyway, that's what he runs to get it, and he gets the cattle, and he brings it back. He gives them, there's a lot of discussion about the fact that he gives them cream and milk and the calf,
Yeah,
right? Milk
that's
and meat.
what I was gonna ask.
So there's a lot of discussion about it. One is that he gave them the milk first and then the meat, because you can have milk and then have meat.
Yeah.
You just have to make sure your mouth is cleaned out. Some people wait a half an hour, but it's not even halakhically required to do that, as long as your mouth is clean from the milk products. You can't go the other way. You can't eat meat. Then you have to wait. Well, if you're from Holland, then it's an hour. If you're a Yeki, if you're from Germany, then it's 3 hours. And if you're the rest of us, 6 hours. So there's different takes on that. But basically, you could say that he separated it out, and so they didn't eat it once. And also, these are angels. They're doing what they're supposed to do, because when you're in a place, you're supposed to follow the minhag hamakam, and the minhag hamakam in Eretz in Olam Hazeh, in this world, is to eat. But the minhag hamakam in Shomayim, which is where angels hang out, is not to eat. So that's why when Moshe went up for 40 days, 3 different times, he didn't eat and he didn't drink, because the minhag hamalkam in that place is not to eat or drink, but down here is to eat and drink. So they say that the angels only pretended to eat, so they didn't really eat. But there's still a problem, because you're not allowed to cook milk and meat together. A person's not allowed to do that. So Abraham wouldn't have done that. He would have cooked them separately. And yes, Benjamin.
I was saying, if they like told Abraham, angels don't eat food, he would be insulted, I'm sure.
Right.
You know.
Right, exactly.
Spurned.
So they pretended to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one answer. They maybe really ate, but they didn't eat milk and meat. They ate the milk first and then the meat. Okay. So the main thing that comes out of this meeting, though, and there's deep Torah about Sarah laughing and her denying laughing, and there's really deep Torah about that. We don't have time to go into that, I'm afraid. But there, just so you know, it's very deep Torah about what's going on there. But then we go on, and she's told, because she's told that she's going to have a son. That's pretty surprising. She's 89 years old, because this is going to be within the next year, and it's going to happen a year later on Pesach, actually. And of course, she's remembered about halfway through this parsha by Hashem Pokad es Sarah, which is where we begin the laning on Rosh Hashanah, on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. And she's going to be remembered. So that's where they say that she conceived. And so then she gave birth on Pesach, which is a little more than 6 months later. It was a 7th-month gestation, which is not an uncommon gestation for people. The majority is 9-month gestation, but there's a significant minority of women that give birth in 7 months, that have 7-month gestation. Okay, and then the men get up to go, and of course Abraham does another mitzvah that we need to do. It's called an eshel, which is when we have guests, we give them achila, we give them aleph to eat, we give them shin shtia to drink, and levaya, lamed. So ashel, when later in this parsha he's going to build an ashel, he's going to make an ashel, and that is for achila, shtia, and levaya, to escort. And so you just escort your guests at the end, you escort them, and so he was escorting them, and they, the men got up and they gazed towards Saddam. And most places in the Torah, there's one place where this is not true, but this is the majority of places where there's a gazing. That's a not good thing, right? That is a foreboding. They gazed towards Saddam, and then Abraham went with them to escort them. In 2 weeks ago, we had Noach. Noach was criticized in the Midrash for not davening for the generation. And he had his reasons for not davening for the generation because they were so despicable and they thought they were right. They thought they were right, so they were never going to do tshuva, so he didn't daven for them. Now, Abraham has the same situation. He sees Hashem is revealing to him that he's going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah because they are so corrupt. And they're like the generation of the flood. In the generation of the flood, they tried to do everything to get around the law. But in the generation of the Sodom and Gomorrah, they tried to change the law. So they changed the law and they made what was right wrong and what was wrong right. So if you took care of people, so that then you were guilty of a capital offense, right?
Sounds like now.
And and so they made it legal to do bad things and they made it illegal to do good things. And so there was an outcry. The Midrash says that there was a particular young woman who was nice to someone who was a visitor into the town, which was illegal. And they killed her by covering her with honey and putting her over an ant pile. And she screamed out in agony, of course. And that was the voice that Hashem heard that caused him to come down and decide to do this. So he's telling Abraham about it, but Abraham is now davening for them. So Abraham is going out to daven, and he says, if there are 50, there are 5 towns altogether. So if there are 10 in each town, if there's a minion of tzaddikim in each town, Hashem, will you destroy them? No, I won't destroy them if they're 50. How about 45? What if there's 9 in each town plus you, Hashem? So that'll be 10. So what about 45? No, I won't destroy them if they're 45 tzaddikim. How about 40? Right? Won't destroy them for 40. Won't destroy them for 30. Won't destroy them for 20. Right? Then I am but dust and ashes, says Avraham Avinu. And the dust is the dust for the sota, the mitzvah sota, and the ashes is the paraduma ashes that we have for making people tahar when they're tameh. And so if I'm only dust and ashes, but still I'm going to ask you, what if there are 10? And Hashem says, even if there are 10, if there are 10 tzaddikim, 2 tzaddikim per town, if there are 10, or even if they're all 10 in one town, I won't destroy the other ones. If there are 10 tzaddikim, I won't destroy, but there aren't 10. And Moshe and Abraham knows to stop there. How did he know to stop there? Because he knew with Noach that there were only 8 tzaddikim. There were 8, and the world wasn't saved for 8. So he knew not to go down because the 8 plus 1 plus Hashem is 9. So therefore he knows that once he gets to 10, that's it. Because if it's less than that, then he knows the answer already. So he stops davening. And then what does he do? He goes back to his place. Sometimes we daven, and we daven for something, and it's so righteous and so wonderful. And nevertheless, the answer is no. So what should we do? Give up? Move to another place? No, that's what Bilam did. That's what Bilam and Balak did. No, we go back to our place. We daven in our regular place, and we know Hashem had a reason for giving us a no as an answer, and we accept it, and we daven some more. And that's what Abraham did. He went back to his place and davened again.
In the end, there was only one. Lot was the only righteous person.
And his righteousness is not so great either. He was saved really in the merit of Abraham.
Okay.
He was saved in the merit of Abraham. Okay, so here we go, and that brings us up to chapter 19, which is on page 84, 85. And this is now where there are now 2 angels, because we don't need Michoel anymore. So Michoel goes back. We still need Refuel, because we need Refuel to save Lot. And so he's got a new mission now, but it's still along the same lines. It's to save Lot. And then we have Gabriel, who's going to be the one who's going to cause the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, the five towns. And so they come to him. He follows in Abraham's footsteps. He was trained by Abraham, so he wants to do chesed. He does it a little bit differently. The Meforshim explain some of the differences as to he's not really Abraham. He's just mimicking Abraham basically, and so that's why some of the differences are there. For example, it shows that when the people of Sodom come to the door and they want to get the two guests because they're going to sodomize them, and Lot says, "Here, I'll give you my two daughters. My two virgin daughters. You can have them and do whatever you want to them, but leave these guests alone." I mean, it's a little bit crazy. So Lot is not totally there, but in any event, he's saved. He and his wife and his two daughters. But unfortunately, they didn't really deserve to be saved. So they were told by Gabriel, don't turn around, because you are not worthy of seeing what's happening to these other people, because it should be you. And you're not worthy of even seeing what's happening to them. So don't turn around. She turned around and she turns into a pillar of salt. And if you've ever been to Eretz Israel with a tour guide, he knows exactly which rock is that pillar of salt.
A little extra money, you can have
You can get a little piece.
Right?
That's right. And see, she was so stingy. She was a sodomite, right? She was so stingy that she wouldn't even give salt to people. Come over for dinner, but I won't give you any salt. So she was punished with salt.
So she was of Sodom.
Yes, so. I mean, I don't know whose Lot's wife is, but we know that he was single when he chose to
Yes,
go
it
to
must have
Sodom.
been, yeah.
So it must have been, I'm surmising, it must have been, he married a girl from Sodom.
So, Svi, why is it when people go there, they go soak in the Dead Sea? I mean, that just seems like that would be the last thing you would want to do, is soak in the ruins of Sodom and Gomorrah.
It's just because it's an interesting experience. You can't stand up. The water forces you to.
I don't know. To me,
back.
there's no reason a Jew would stand
There's
in
a lot
there.
of salt there. There's a lot of salt.
That's where Sodom is.
That's where they were, right?
In that
That's where
area,
it was
but
that was where it was overturned.
Right.
There were
maybe
four
it's
of
under
the five
Dead
towns
Sea.
were overturned. One of them,
Dead
the last
Sea
one,
has
Sora,
salt.
was where Lot went, because that was a year younger in its wickedness. So that one wasn't destroyed right away. So Lot wanted to go there. He went there, but then it was destroyed also. But it wasn't on the same, the way that I understand it is there was a plate, a Teutonic plate that overturned basically and flipped over the four towns. And then Sora was on the edge, and then it got sucked in, shortly after.
So when the Dead Sea dries up, which supposedly it's on its way to doing, it will reveal Sodom and Gomorrah.
I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know.
I don't think so.
Okay, so Lot saved. Now, this is, by the way, I've told you this before, there are 10 places in the Torah where there are dots over the words, and they're actually in the Torah. So the first one is in the first, right at the top of page 80. It's in the first aliyah. It's the second word on the top line. That's on the word love. And that's basically to say that that kind of teach us that a person shouldn't ask directly about how a person's wife is. He shouldn't directly ask the wife, should be a little bit more sneeze than that. And the second one, the second dot that we have here is in the case of Lot and his daughters, and that's on page 90. And that is on 6 lines down, and it's the last word of that pasuk. So it's the third word from the left of that line. You see it in the margin, and then over the margin, you'll see there's a dot on the second vav. There's an asterisk on the first vav, but that's just for the word. That's the start scroll. But the dot in the Torah is on the vav. That's uvakuma. Now, Lot's daughters felt that they and their father were the only people left in the entire world. As far as they were concerned, the whole world was destroyed. And so they're doing a mitzvah. They're doing an avera lishmo. They're doing it for the sake of heaven. And so what they're doing is they believe that they need to repopulate the world, and they're the last women alive, and their father is the only man alive. So the older daughter says, let's get our father drunk, and then we'll have relations with him, and hopefully we'll get pregnant, hopefully we'll conceive, and we'll be able to keep the world going. So the first night, the older daughter does. She gets credit in the Gemara for being first, being Zorus and being first. However, she names her child in a very non-sneistic way, Moav, Me'av, from my father. So it's not really a nice thing to say. And so therefore she's criticized for that. The younger daughter, who's criticized for not being Zorus, she waited until the second night, got her father drunk again, and then she had relations with her father, and she conceived, and she called her father Ami, from my people. A little bit more subtle, and so that's Ammon. So we get Moab and Ammon from those girls. Which is an amazing thing because Ruth comes from Moab. Ruth is the ancestress of David HaMelech. She's the great grandmother of David HaMelech, who's of course the ancestor of the Mashiach. And so the Mashiach is coming through the line of Lot, which is really kind of an amazing, amazing thing. Now, maybe Lot was drunk, right? You might say that Lot was drunk, and so he didn't really know what he was doing. So how can we say he's a Rasha? So the way we say it is because of this dot. The dot on this word, that's uvakumo, because it says there that right so they plied their father with wine on the night, and the older one came and lay with her father, and he was not aware of her lying down and of her getting up. But on the getting up, that's the word uvakumo, on the getting up. He wasn't aware when he actually got up, but right after that, he was aware that something happened.
Well,
So therefore, but even at that point, he's not really a Rasha, because at that point, he still didn't know at the time that he was doing it. But the next night, when the next night came, and they're now going to get him drunk. So he knows that something happened the night before when they got him drunk. So now he knows when they're getting him drunk again, that it's going to happen again. So that's what makes him a Rasha. So the Gemara says that's why he's a Rasha.
Yeah.
But let's say he was aware and he wanted to do it because he wanted to continue the human race, but he too knew.
Right, but he didn't.
He didn't.
But he didn't.
Yeah.
And so therefore, he was not doing an Avera Lishmo. He was just doing an Avera. He was just had in his mind. Now, he wasn't aware when he was doing it, because all of the conceptions of the Mashiach that we know about, all the conceptions of the Mashiach that we know about, the origins of the Mashiach, the man is not aware of what's going on. Think of Yehuda and Tamar. Yehuda, he thinks he's with a prostitute. He doesn't realize what's happening. So he doesn't realize either. So,
but this is B'shogeg, not Mason.
This is for him. It's if he wouldn't have realized and then participated the second night, it would be even less than B'shogeg. It would be Ba'onis, that he had no choice in it. But because he was aware of it, so now he skips all the way to Mazid, because he knows he's getting drunk for what's going to be happening. And therefore, even though he doesn't realize it while it's happening, but he realizes that it's going to happen. So therefore he's doing it b'mezi, he's doing it intentionally.
But it's intentionally for good purpose.
No, he was not doing it for a good purpose. He was just doing it to do it.
I feel like an echo of Noah in this, right? There's a horrible calamity, and then there was drunkenness, and then there was impropriety with your offspring.
Absolutely. Very good. Very good. Right. And it may be another thing that we're masakin, when we make Kiddush on wine. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to lift up the wine instead of using it for a bad purpose. We're using it for a good purpose. So I have in mind that we're be masakin Noach, but maybe you're right. Maybe another thing is that we're masakin Lot as well. Maybe that's true too, because wine is in the Gemara in the seventh parak of Sanhedrin. The wine is, kind of introduced to us as being a double-edged sword, right? It could be for good, it could be for not for good. We have to be careful with what we use wine for, and that's why we want to use it for mitzvahs, right? We do for virtually every mitzvah. We have a bris milah, we drink wine, right? We have a wedding, we drink wine. We have a Shabbos meal, we drink wine.
there was it like a sort of like a correction of what happened with Noah because they're trying to stop him from procreating, or this was trying to create more procreation?
Oh, I don't know if I don't think they were trying to repair what Noah had done. I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe they were. Maybe that's what they're trying to do. There's nobody left in the world, so they got to bring the population of the world. So maybe so.
No, with Noah, it was like the opposite.
With Noah, he was trying to forget what happened, really, right?
No,
He was
what his son did, because they say
what his son did, right?
in one opinion says he was trying to prevent him.
Right. He castrated him as one opinion because he didn't want to share. He didn't want his 1/3 of the world to be diluted. It was that agreed. And the other one was that he sodomized him, but in either way, he preventing new people from being born into the world. Maybe that's why he got cursed too. It's a good point. Very, very good
Noah was just
connection.
celebrating getting off that ark after a lot of time.
Wasn't celebrating, he got off the ark and everybody that he knew and
He's gone.
was gone. The whole world was gone. What could be more depressing than that? That's why we talked about him. We said he's like the Holocaust survivors, he saw the world before the destruction, he saw the destruction, and he saw the world after the destruction.
Yeah.
But the same with Lot, right? The 5 cities that were
Exactly.
the-
Yes,
I
sir.
mean, he didn't know
Yeah.
what was going on.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah. Good points. All good points. Okay. Now we go into, and I've been looking for this. I found something in Reb Samson Raphael Hirsch about this point. But now Abraham leaves Eretz Canaan proper and he goes to Gaza. He goes south to Gaza. It's not considered to be outside of Eretz Israel because next week's Parsha Yitzhak's going to go down there. Again, same scenario and same scenario we had with going to Egypt, except Egypt was really out of Eretz Israel completely. So I'm trying to figure out why this is happening. What Reb Samson Raphael Hirsch said is that this was a normal thing, that basically people dwelled apart. And then when they would come into a city, so they would be afraid of what the people of the city, what the residents of the city would do to them. So they would basically say that this is my sister as opposed to this is my wife. Because if it's a wife, so women who were already married were very cheap commodities. And basically what would happen is they'd kill the husband and they'd take the wife. But if it was a sister, what they would do is curry favor with the brother to basically let the brother then say, oh, I'll give you my sister to marry. And so that's what they would do. So they would do it in that way. And so according to Reb Samson Raphael Hirsch, that was a common thing that people did at the time. And that's why we have these 3 stories. I think there's something deeper. I don't know what it is. I'm going to still try and think about it and still try and look for it to see that it's got to be something, what is Abraham learning from going to Mitzrayim? Because that was a test, right? That was a test of Abraham's. And when he's going to Ger, that's a test also. So therefore, there's some growth that's supposed to be coming out of this. But nevertheless, his poor wife Sarah is in trouble. Now, if you look at when he goes to Mitzrayim in last week's parsha, he says to her, say you're my sister, and she does. She tells them that she's the sister. But in Ger, he's the one that says she's my sister. She doesn't say, because I don't know if she wants to do this thing again. It was pretty dangerous in Mitzrayim, and it's pretty dangerous here in Ger too. But anyway, that's what happens. And then we see another side here of Abimelech, because Abimelech grabs her, and then he goes to sleep, and he has a dream at night, and Hashem speaks to him in the dream and says, if you do anything to this woman, I'm going to kill you and your people. And Abimelech says, would you kill a righteous nation? We didn't do anything to her. And he himself said that she was his sister. So would you penalize this righteous nation? So Hashem says, yes, I will, because he's a Navi. And he'll know, the reason that he tells Abimelech he's a Navi is so that Abimelech knows that Abraham will know that nothing happened to Sarah. because he's a Navi. That's that's what the Gemara says that's talking about. And so then the next day, Avimelech, summons Abraham, and he says to Abraham, why did you do this? What did you see that you had to do this? And this is a very important line. This is on page 93. It says, and Abraham said, because I said there's no fear of God in this place, and they will slay me because of my wife. Because there's no Yiras Shamayim.
But Avimelech had Yiras.
Well, he talked to Hashem, but Abraham knows that there's no, what he would do is he would trump up charges. Basically, they would pass a new law. You can't park your camel at that corner. And that's exactly where Abraham has his camel parked. And so he gets a ticket, but the penalty for the ticket is not a $5 fine. It's a death penalty.
No, but I'm saying that Avimelech knew that it was wrong.
He knew that it was wrong. It's true.
It means that he had some Torah too. Why? How would he know?
It's a good point. It's a very good point. He must have known something, right? He knew it was wrong.
Like wrong.
Socially, maybe.
So Svi, when like we have a test if we do something wrong, and the test is if we're in the same exact situation again, and we do it again. So didn't Abraham actually do that? He put his wife at risk, and then this time now he does it again. So the test is, and he failed because he shouldn't have put his wife.
Did he pass it? I don't know. Did he pass it? If you go to page 100, I'm just skipping ahead just quickly. You can see the Rashi and the Rambam, how ArtScroll lists them in listing the tests, and so if you look at the Rambam's test, so the Rambam has a test of Avimelech's abduction of Sarah, and it's a test. And then we have the Paro's kidnapping of Sarah, both by Rashi. Sarah was kidnapped by Sarah. It's test number 5, according to Rashi, and according to the Rambam, the corruption of Egypt that resulted in the abduction of Sarah, which is the 3rd test. That's essentially the difference between the Rashi and the Rambam's tests. Rashi uses midrashim, and the Rambam only uses things that are mentioned in the Torah. But Rashi uses the midrashim as well. Like hiding from Nimrod and then being flung into the fiery furnace, which we don't have in the Torah. So, but anyway, they're both using Egypt, and they're also using, at least the Rambam's using Avimelech for the same thing. So they were tests, and we're told that Abraham passed these tests. So I don't know what it means exactly, but because it's repetitive, and then we're going to see it next week also with Yitzhak. Yitzhak's going to do the same thing with Rivka and Avimelech. Okay, anyway, what happens is that let me go back to where we were before. So Avimelech appeases Abraham, and unlike Paro, who said, get out of Dodge, you got to get out of Egypt, Avimelech said, here, you can stay here as long as you want. And so Abraham does, he stays there in Ger. And he gives Sarah what the Meforshim say is a curse. He gives her 1,000 pieces of silver. I've given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, let it be for you an eye covering for all who are with you, and to all you will be vindicated. And they say that this was why Yitzhak became blind later on in life, because it was an eye covering. It was a curse that he was giving to Sarah, Avimelech. Okay, then we go on, chapter 21. Really, really important. This is what we lane on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, chapter 21. Chapter 22, we lane on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. And the first day of Rosh Hashanah, which starts off with Hashem Pokad es Sarah, Ka'asher Omar. And Hashem remembered Sarah as he had said. Now, he's remembering her, as he said before, and so they say that this would be the conception that would happen on Rosh Hashanah. And then Yitzhak's going to be born on the following Pesach. And there's a really important thing right before this, and that is that Abraham davened for Avimelech, because Hashem had protected Sarah with Avimelech by covering up all of the orifices of the body. And they were all plugged up for him and all of his people. And so Avram davens for him to open the orifices, to open that up. And then Sarah's answered, because Rashi says that Sarah davened also. Very difficult to daven for your enemy, extremely difficult to daven for good things to happen to your enemy. And this was a guy who kidnapped her, was going to have his way with her. And so they davened for him. And then they're answered. It's an important point on Rosh Hashanah that Rabbi Meir made many years ago, where he had us each talk to the person we were standing next to about something to daven for them. And then we would daven for them. And miracles happened that year when we did that, people recovered from illnesses. It was kind of a remarkable thing.
I don't know if it's exactly the person standing next to you. I mean, you're talking about davening for Hamas,
That's right. But we're davening for them to do tshuva, right? And to recognize HaKadosh Baruch Hu as the one. Okay, so Sarah then conceives. She has Yitzhak. And we're told earlier, that she laughed and Abraham laughed in last week's Parsha when they're told about this. So guess what Yitzhak's name is? Laughter, right? So, and then Abraham circumcises him at 8 days old. This is I think the first person that was circumcised at 8 days. Although it's not a commandment now at 8 days until we have Matan Torah and we get Parshat Tazriach, where it says that it should be done on the 8th day. But he was circumcised at 8 days, and Abraham was 100 years old. Sarah was 90 years old, and he grew and he was weaned, and they have a great feast. And this great feast is something that the Satan challenges Hashem about, and Hashem says, "Don't go after my servant Abraham. He's not so great. Go after Eov." And that's how Eov begins. Job. That's how the book of Job begins. So Hagar and Ishmael are so then what happens is that Sarah sees that Yitzhak is a bad influence that Ishmael is a bad influence on Yitzhak. Yitzhak is 14 years younger, and so Ishmael is using Yitzhak as the stand. He's playing William Tell, putting an apple on his head.
Does it say that? Pick on Job? Does it say in the Chumash?
No, not in the Chumash. Not in the Chumash. No, yeah, from the book of Job. Let's see.
It's from the book of Job.
Yeah, you see, it's from the commentary on the book of Job. All right. So Hagar, the art school has a beautiful, I've learned this through in detail, a beautiful book on Job. Mm-hmm. And it really is a deep explanation. It's done by, he's a Rebbe in Ner Yisrael. I can't think of his name right now. But really a beautiful commentary. It's really so in-depth and so really excellent. Really well researched and well sourced. Moshe Eisenman, Rabbi Moshe Eisenman. And he's still at Ner Yisrael. He's older. I think he's older than I am even. But he's still teaching.
Young guy.
Young guy. And so Sarah sees that Ishmael is a bad influence on Yitzhak. So she goes to Abraham and says, "You got to get rid of the slave woman, get rid of her son." And this is very distressing to Abraham. He loves Hagar. He loves his son Ishmael. But Hashem tells him, "Your wife knows more than you do. You have to listen to what your wife says." Good lesson for all the men sitting here. Yes. Listen to what your wife says.
He didn't say it.
Are you going to protest today?
Some sources seem to indicate Hagar was a wife also.
Yeah.
And it says her son, but he's also Abraham's son.
Yeah.
I mean, Sarah's kind of.
But she was a slave too. She was an Egyptian slave. She was a princess, an Egyptian princess. And
how could a princess be a slave?
Because her father, who was Paro, told her that you're better off to be a slave to Abraham and Sarah than you are to be here. And so he actually gave her to Abraham and Sarah.
Very expendable daughter.
And
well,
no, but it was for her good, And she was very, very spiritual. Remember in last week's Parsha, she spoke to 4 angels. She spoke to 4 angels. It says that an angel spoke to her 4 times. Some people say it's 1 angel 4 times. Some people say it's 4 different angels. But she was on a very high level, Hagar.
She was greater than me.
Really?
She was greater
Greater than me.
A lot of people. And
I
so,
don't speak to angels.
So she was a trouble to
Yeah. To Sarah.
Pharaoh. And like
She was a pain in the neck.
Pharaoh sent her to Abraham
She was his
to
leg
keep her
with-
manners.
daughter, he loved her. She was in trouble. She was his daughter. He loved him. But we'll see in next week's Parsha that according to Rashi, basing on Midrash, Hagar is Keturah. And so Abraham, after Sarah dies, and after Abraham gets Yitzhak married in next week's Parsha, then he marries Hagar and he has more children with her.
What are their
Do we
names?
know where she
Well, we
was?
have their names. They're
We
in
have
next
their
week's Parsha. Well, all the names are there. And how many? Yeah.
Do we know where she was in between?
I would assume she went back to Egypt. I would assume she went back to her father. I don't know. But Ishmael, was out in the kind of the wilderness. He was learning how to be an archer, and it was and Abraham went to try and get him to come back, and was able to get Ishmael to do tshuva. And in the Akedah, which happens the end of this week's parsha, the Ishmael comes back, and he and Eliezer are the 2 young men that go with Abraham and Yitzhak on the Akedah. We're about ready to get to the Akedah, and we'll have about 1 minute to do it.
Oh my God. That's a big one.
So Yishmael is saved. Then the 6th Aliyah is a very, very interesting Aliyah. It requires a lot of study, but it's doing something even beyond davening for your enemies. It's having lunch with your enemies at the deli. That's what it is. It's making peace with your enemies, because here comes Elimelech and Pichol. Pichol is a general. So when Pichol is coming along, he's not coming along by himself. He's coming with a whole army. So they're coming to kind of get Abraham here, and they make a truce. They make a truce with 7 ewes. And one of the reasons why Beersheba is called Beersheba is because of that, because it was the well of the 7, the well of the oath that they took, and they made a peace treaty. They made a peace treaty, and that's a very difficult thing to do, but Abraham did that, which is putting him now back in chesed, because there's really no greater chesed than that, and that lines him up to do the 10th test, according to Rashi and the Rambam, the 10th test, which is Akedas Yitzhak, which is a test in Geburah, because Rav Dessler says that we all have basic characteristics. Abraham's basic characteristic was chesed, and he gets tested in Geburah. Now, after each test of Geburah, he more or less has to true himself up in chesed. So he just sent away Yishmael, which is a real test in Geburah. He then trues it up with making peace with Abimelech, and then he gets tested in Geburah again. And so that's where he takes Yitzhak. This we read every day in the morning davening. We read the Akedas Yitzhak at the beginning of the morning davening. Very good thing to say. Very deep. There are many, many things in each line of this, and you can read the commentary and see some of it. And the Gemara goes into it in great detail and basically reads between the lines. We have the only thing that we can do is just say at the end. So Abraham leaves with the 2 youths, which are not really youths, they're Eliezer and Yishmael. Yitzhak is nowhere to be seen until next week's Parsha. Yeah, there's a lot to be said about that. Maybe we'll talk more about it next week. And then we have Abraham being told about the birth of Rivka, because Rivka is coming from Milcah, who was the other sister, right? There were 3 kids. There was Lot, 3 kids of Haran. There was Lot, there was Milcah, and there was Sarai. Abraham married Sarai. Nahar married Milcah. And now Nahar and Milcah have these kids. They have 8 kids. The last one is Bethuel, and Bethuel fathers Rivka. And that's what Abraham's told about. It's significant that he's the 8th child, right? Because that's above nature. And then we get Rivka out of that. Okay. Have a great Shabbos.
So the characteristics